So imagine that you've got a law firm website. I'm trying to imagine that I'm doing a course website for a class. And so you'll see some information about the class, and you'll see the syllabus there. And you can and should always check here for latest updates and changes to schedules and assignment due dates and things of that nature. I thought the banner was going to look really good, but I think it's just a giant mistake. At some point during this class, I'll ask Sean to critique this. I'm actually really nervous. I've shown you all what I've done, and I'm about to introduce somebody who's much better at this than I am. So here's the idea: is that one of the widgets, and it links to the blog, the website URLs that I'd received as of last night, and so if you want a quick link to your classmates' blogs, websites, you can get them and get some ideas and and comment on each other's work, or if you have suggestions and things like that, you can do that as well. This is from the social bookmarking site that I mentioned before. Well, actually, this one's called Delicious, and these are bookmarks that I or Sean and I together have tagged, and they're just to give you some idea of some good sites. And you can, of course, you can click on this link and go to the whole collection of web design bookmarks that we've saved. You may find it useful. There's a lot of stuff in there that's specific to lawyers and design elements for lawyers and law firms, and best practices and worst practices and things you should avoid. Twitter feed. Later on during class, hopefully we'll all participate in that process. Here, and when you guys get to posting more, I'll pull together the feeds from your websites and have them filter in through here. So this will be a quick portal to the kinds of things that you guys have been posting about or commenting on. Quick and easy. What else? The first class recording is here if you want to refer back to it. Usually I'll record a screen capture and with audio, so you'll be able to go back and look at the slides if you want to, if that's helpful. And the first one is here. So, any questions? This is the Coraline theme. I think that's one of about 100 free themes that you have to play around with. Okay, so to my right is Sean Fellhofer. He is our digital initiatives librarian. Sean is a cataloger by trade. That means that he's concerned with the organization of information and easy retrieval of information, leading into the maintenance and development of databases, leading into a particular web design ethic and philosophy. And Sean has done a lot of work with WordPress. He's also a sad Packers fan, and so be kind of gentle. It's all very sensitive. I was afraid he wasn't going to show up today. So take it away, Sean.
Okay, I'm going to find a place to put these. And so first of all, where's the slides that I'm going to?
Oh, just go all the way down to the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. You can.
It's really sensitive. Okay. So just a little background. I've actually, Simon mentioned like my job and stuff, but I also have done like a few freelance web design jobs for people, friends. I did a book site for a professor to do who wrote a book on aging. We need a website. done a couple for a friend who's a writer, a few other ones I've done. I've always used WordPress. I use the open source, the .org version, not the .com, just because I can play with it more. And basically, just from reading and studying a lot about web design, those are my qualifications, but those are the qualifications of almost every web designer. Almost everybody's self-taught. So my quote is like, great designers create, everyone else is procreating. In an hour or whatever, you're not going to turn yourself into a great web designer. But the idea is to say, why does something work, and why do things not work, and also to give you a vocabulary to actually be able to talk about why something works. I mean, one of the things you'll notice is like, you ever go to a web page and know instantly, oh, this is awful. You may not be able to tell why, but you can sense that. That's a feel you get. So we're going to talk about that concept. Before you start, I think the idea is like you guys are making websites for a fictitious law firm or a law firm to be. Is that the general idea? Okay, so the two most important questions you want to ask when you're doing this is, who is your audience? And then what do you want to say and, more importantly, convey to them? You really can't design a website for everybody. When I was taking a class in web design in library school, one of the adjuncts was the webmaster of the University of Minnesota. And when they were redesigning their site, they actually created this fictitious 26-year-old student who commuted from uptown and was like a, I don't know, English lit major or something. And they designed with her in mind. And if you think about it, it makes sense. An institution as large as the University of Minnesota, you have grad students, undergrad, staff, faculty, everybody, football fans coming there to see their website. You can't please everybody. So you have to decide, who is our audience? And in that case, they made it really narrow and said, this is our audience, is this person. If we design it right for this person, everybody else should sort of fall in line, but that's who we're aiming for. We're not aiming for the faculty. We're not aiming for grad students. We're aiming for this particular person. So in a law firm, you want to think about what kind of, who's my audience? If you're doing criminal law, you're not going to design the same way as if you're doing a family law site. I mean, if you just think about that for a second, family law is that kind of, and I want to like totally stereotype, but it's much more touchy-feely kind of law. It's got a lot more social work elements in it than like criminal law. You might be like, I got to get this guy off, or I got to get this woman off. It's probably a much more aggressive feel that you want to show to people rather than if you're elder law, you don't want that kind of aggression. And websites, whether you know it or not, you're getting like a sense of like aggression or authoritativeness just from the way your website looks. Okay, so let me just, okay, so every element that you do in a website, whether it's color, font, organization of information, should say the same message to your audience. So if you're using colors that conflict with who your audience is, or using like a sort of a, oh, it's a frilly little website and it's criminal law, that dissonance is not going to really attract users or give you any credibility. I mean, you don't want to like, oh, it's just whimsical law, or it's whimsical criminal law. Well, criminal law isn't whimsical. So you're not going to choose colors or choose fonts that, you know, sort of convey that emotion. Okay, first impression. There was a study in Canada, I think it's like 5-6 years ago, where what they did is, I think it was at McGill University, they flashed websites to study participants for less than a second and said, what do you think of this website? Like it, don't like it, or not? Then later, they had this same participants look at the same websites for a couple of minutes. And the correlation between what people liked for a millisecond and what they liked for longer was almost exact. People, you know, they see things and they almost instantly if they like it or they don't like it. And that's why it's so important to create like a good first impression with a website. Just like an aside, I was downloading software the other day, and all these websites, oh, this is great software. You go to the website, and it looks like it's from 1999. I'm like, wow, am I going to get a virus downloading this? And it's Audacity. I don't know if you ever use Audacity audio software. Their website looks like it's something started in 1999. You're like, is this really worth downloading? It's legit, but it just creates that impression that it's like some sort of amateur operation somewhere that I'm going to get a virus by downloading. So the impression is really important. Then part of that impression is information architecture. How do you organize the information that you have? Is it logical to a user? And you want to think about a user, not about you. Is it logical to somebody who's coming to my website to look for something? The other thing is visual elements. Color, font, the graphics you choose, the pictures you choose, the layout you choose. They all convey meaning and authoritativeness to a potential audience. So if you choose the wrong colors, like I said before, you may create the sense of, oh, this is really bad. Or your layout is really disorganized. That's not going to create a very good impression to somebody coming to visit you as a potential client for your law firm. Okay, so I'd actually go back. I want you to look at this website for I only let you flash this for 3 seconds, and I want you to tell me what kind of law firm this is. 1, 2, 3. Okay, what kind of law do they practice?
Environmental.
Can I turn on the light? Sure, I can see a little better.
Environmental law. Everybody's. Oh, that's too dark. I can't see behind the notes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
How about halfway? What do I do to get this on? Okay. Everybody's. Can they see it? No, they can't see it. Get whatever I need to do there.
There you go.
Okay. Can you guys see this or not? Oh, it's a blank screen. Of course you can. Okay. Everybody says environmental law, but that's not the case. It's estate planning. Okay. Why did you think it's environmental law? Okay. Well, there's a tree growing there or a plant. It's green. Happenstance is the person's name is green. That's, but if you looked at that, almost everything about that website says, we practice environmental law. I don't think you'd lose a client because of that, but it just sort of gives you an idea of how important that impression is. Now, I really actually like this website, but I think it's kind of confusing. Because I saw this right away and I thought, environmental law. Okay, another one like that. What kind of practice areas does this person do, or this firm do? Now I'm going to actually go back. What do they do?
Veterans Affairs.
Okay. Anybody else?
Corporate law.
Okay, let him go. Veterans Affairs is one of them, but it's also criminal defense, military and veterans issues. They do a whole bunch of stuff. But I think if you looked at their website, you would think, oh, if I'm looking for criminal law, I'm not going to go here because they're doing Veterans Affairs. Although I've showed this to somebody in the past, and they thought it was construction law. So they thought it was like tool belts on the side. So I think in this way, it conveys what they do, but doesn't convey all that they do. It sort of limits them. It's like, oh, they're the Veterans Affairs guys. I'm going to go on to the next one. They're not for me. I'm looking for something else. I'm looking for business law or estate planning. Oh, hit that wrong. So one last one. What does this law firm do? Say again?
I would say appellate.
Have you seen? No, you're right
No,
on.
I just-
No, it's exactly
Like
it.
you see on the picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost cliched with, oh, we've got the Supreme Court, we're white and blue, we've got this sort of noble sort of look. But yeah, that's all they do. They practice appellate law before the Supreme Court. I think it's kind of cliched, but it's also really effective. There's no mistaking what they do. You don't think, oh, I'm going to go there because I just got a DUI charge. No, you go there because that's what they do. And that really shows how that first impression is really so important in creating your authoritativeness in what you do. So if you're going to practice in any kind of specific area, you want to give that consideration.
So a thought that occurred to me, if you go back to Donahue Green, so I think part of it is what you imagine that the firm's practice areas to be based on the image and the sense of it, but it's also, if you are looking for estate planning assistance, you are in that mindset, what kind of general impression would make you feel comfortable about a website? And it could be that the concept of starting something new, growth, and so on is very purposefully implanted there.
Although, when I saw that, I thought it was like over a funeral plot. That's what I thought. It was like dirt on a plot. And I've actually showed that.
Yeah.
So I think it's
you're
too
dead, but something's growing.
growing. I know that sounds sort of morbid, but I showed that to another person. They thought the same thing. That it was like there's too much dirt and not enough growth. But that does point to the ambiguity and how, like for instance, that when we looked at that was appellate, how obvious that was, and how important that is. If you have that ambiguity, that maybe a sign that it's maybe not quite the right imagery or the right feel, because I don't, Simon interpreted it that way. I said, that looks like a funeral plot, which is not what I'd want for estate planning because it seems a little bit morbid. But it just points out the importance of imagery and feel and color and all those elements in a designing web page. Okay. So now let's talk about information architecture. Before we even think about what we want our web page to look like, the first thing you want to do is decide what are you actually going to put on your web page. What's the important information? What's the content? And you actually really have to give this some thought, because I had a friend of mine that I was doing a web page. She's a writer. She said, "Oh, I want this page." And I said, "Well, what are you going to put on that page?" "Well, I don't know, but I need a page like that." I'm like, "Well, why? You have no content for that particular page." So it's really important to actually think about what is your content before you say, "Oh, I need this page, this page, this page, and this page." Because if you just have a page with no content, why bother with it? So what I always suggest when doing a web page, and I do this myself, is I start writing blocks of content before I even think about how I'm going to organize it. In your case, biography. Why, you got to establish your bona fides. Why should I trust you as a lawyer? What have you done? So write a block of content about that. Maybe your practice areas and expand on your practice areas. Contact information, have to add that somewhere. Disclaimer. So you start writing those contact areas, and I know some people actually write it on like 3x5 cards and sort of sketch it out. And then you might want to start even getting more content. And at this point, you might want to start thinking, what goes on its own page? What can be combined? What works together? Maybe I don't have enough testimonials to merit its own page, but I'd like to include it. What can I combine that with logically? You're not going to put your testimonials on your disclaimer page. So what elements and what content can be grouped together to make a logical, seamless web page? So as you start doing this and you're typing out, you're gathering your information and creating your content, you probably, on a small web page or law firm web page, probably don't want to use more than like 7 navigation tabs. And yeah, that's an arbitrary number, but think about it. On a small page, if you have more than 7 or 8, you probably have content that's too diffuse. You're getting pages with 3 or 4 sentences on them. If you have tons and tons of content, like Amazon.com, obviously, they have navigation all over the page. Yeah, but they have billions of items. But for a generic small law firm, 1 to 10 person law firm, you probably don't have that much content that you can use 10, 15, 20 tabs. And also, if you do, are your users going to go through each one of those? I mean, do you have to give everything you do to your audience in a website? I mean, sometimes there's a general rule of like web design for institutions. It sort of applies to like a small firm. Colleges and universities should write all the content and then cut half of it away. Because nobody, I know, most people don't go to every page on the page. They don't, it's just, all we have to include is, edit, edit, edit. Keep the important stuff. Really don't be afraid to get rid of the stuff that isn't that important. So in this case, let's say I've just started sketching out a schematic. What kind of areas, what kind of content do I want to include on this web page? And so here, I probably have too many disparate elements. So what I did, here's a possible example of how a web page could be structured. Instead of having those 9 individual areas, I've broken it down to 5, and I've sort of had sub-pages or elements that could be included on that page. So, and then I said, you know what, I'm going to use my contact information on every page rather than have that being a separate page. And that's just a matter of preference, but that's an option you can use. And so in the about the firm, I moved the testimonials and the cases together because that's logical. I wouldn't put them under disclaimer or practice areas. So you sort of want to think, okay, this is what we do. And I think every firm or every imaginary firm is going to have different elements of this, but the process is the important part. Is really saying, what are the blocks of content? How do they go together for my users? And it's not always what pleases me, it's the users. These are my imagined users. How are they going to look for information? Not how I have my own system of doing it. That's not what you want to do. Think of your users first. So that's just like a sort of an elementary way of structuring a schematic. And I know when I've done websites for people, I actually end up with drawings like this. And whether I do them in paper or like in Word, it's almost always end up with something like this. I draw out, this is the pages that all connect. Another reason for this is, it's easy to do the front page of a website. It's the secondary pages that's the problem. That always becomes, oh, I know what I want to do in this page, but oh, what do I do on the other page? Okay, so now that we've sort of got our information architecture, now we have to start thinking about describing our pages in the smallest meaningful terms possible. You can't really have a tab that says, this is the practice area that I, get small, meaningful terms. If you have to use 5, 6, 7 words to describe that page, that's probably a good sign that your page isn't focused enough. You haven't really narrowed down your content. If you can't describe your content in 2 or 3 terms or 1 or 2 or 3 terms, you probably aren't focusing enough on your content for that particular page. These are just some that I culled from the web. I just grabbed them and copied them and put them on here. For web design, in my mind, horizontal or vertical does not matter. I mean, I think horizontal is probably more popular these days with a lot of websites, and that it just goes through trends. But the important thing is that you have the consistent navigation on every page. That's something that drives me crazy about a lot of web pages, wink, wink, is they don't have consistent navigation on every single page. And that means the same terms in the same order in the same place. If you call it About Us on the front page, call it About Us on the other page. And that seems so basic, but you see websites that don't do that, and they drive you nuts. Because what is that now?
Have you noticed that Google uses both horizontal and vertical now? And what do you think about that?
I think for a site that has that much information and that many choices, it's probably a good thing. For almost every large website, and when I mean talking large, I mean lots of content, are going to do that. Any college and university almost has to do that.
Right. No, I know you mentioned that in the context of Amazon. Do you mind if I just show something super quick? I just have been thinking about this a little bit lately.
Suppose it's a large website, it also kind of allows the user to know, okay, I'm on the right part of the website.
Yeah, and there's so many things you have to do. For a small law firm, it would be just absolute overkill to have down here and then here. It would sort of imply to me that you aren't focused enough. Because how many pages do you really need?
But okay, but here we've got a result set, and it looks like kind of very much overlapping on the left and on the top. Isn't that odd? And there's actually a difference. Maybe it doesn't matter, but if you use this top set, it starts fresh. Yeah. If you use the side set, it takes your And so, I don't know. I mean, it seems a little bit random to me. No?
I find it annoying that it's changed because I do that a lot where I'll want the web search and then you go to the news search and it's like, oh, I got to retype 5 letters, but it's still annoying. I think they're experts. They know what they're doing, but I think for most of us, you don't need double navigation in a law firm, a small law firm. I'm not talking about 700. Oh, even that, you really have the same information that you're giving to people, right? You're not really, just because the firm size is different, you don't have you may have more biographies, may have more practice areas, but you probably don't have any more basic categories. I know when I was first looking at this, I went through tons of law firm websites. I'm talking dozens and dozens. And there really isn't a lot of difference between them except how successful they are in their designs. We have this About Us, this is they basically have the same 5 concepts or pages, and they have a few other pages added on, but they're almost all the same. And so it really, I don't think you'd want to overload people with everything there. Okay, talk about horizontal versus vertical. One of the things that actually should guide you in what you'd like to use is what your secondary pages are going to contain. Okay, why would I say that? This is if you look at the web, pretty much, I'll use the 80-20 rule because you can just make up things and use 80-20, right? 80% of the web looks like this, the other 20%. But this is really typical of if you really break down web pages to a very basic elements, this is what they look like. They may have, additional stuff over here, columns over here, but they basically have the same element. Let's say you're using the horizontal navigation. On the front page, you have a nice picture, and then you have words. But if you use that, horizontal. If you go to the secondary page, and you don't have pictures, now your words are going to be really long across that screen. You're going to have a lot of area for text. So that's something you have to consider. Am I going to put images, or am I going to put a box, or something to break up that text? Because if you have a whole page of text, it becomes really unreadable. So that actually is something you have to consider with your design choices. What are the secondary pages going to look like? And I think a lot of people just design the front page, and then you click to the next page, you're like, oh, that didn't work at all. if you were to use like the vertical navigation, you have much more limited real estate here. So if you want to include picture or elements on there, if you use the vertical here, you may not have that option on your secondary page. It really doesn't matter what you do, but I think you should just think about that through and sort of plan not just the front page, but what a secondary page looks like. Because you see that a lot, actually, on bad websites. It's like, oh, that front page is all right, and then you do the next one, like, what the heck were they thinking of this? Well, they probably didn't even go to the next step. Okay, so you've got sort of the idea of your structure, but now we have to start adding stuff to our web page. So you're gonna have to get some sort of imagery. Some web pages can get away with just having text. You have to be pretty good to do it, but most law firm sites are going to have some sort of imagery, whether it's the gavel or like we saw the Supreme Court or the plant growing out of, obviously, a tomb. Or you have to have some imagery. Okay. Most of us aren't professional photographers or don't have access to professional photography for the most part. So there's a few places on the web that you can actually get free imagery. And one of them here is freedigitalphotos.net. They may not have exactly what you want, but you can look around and say, okay, I'm looking for justice or whatever. You can do searches. I just grabbed this one, but there's probably dozens others like this. If you just Google, free stock photos, you'll be able to find something. And there's different rights levels that you can use it for a commercial site, a non-commercial site. You can use this size free. You just have to read through that. You guys are all attorneys to be. You can read all the licensing and stuff. But if you don't have the images, just Google freestockimages.com. Another area is probably Wikipedia Commons. You might not find as many images you want to use there, but it's another option to choose. And just sort of look around and see what you can come up with. And if you are going to use photos of yourself, I can't stress this enough, use a good photo. I mean, do you have friends who have digital cameras unless you're the one? The test is, do they have a tripod? If they don't have a tripod, I wouldn't trust them. I mean, that sounds really rude, but it's like, you don't want to be that person that's on, like, above the law of, like, look at that goofy, I don't know if you ever read the blog Above the Law. You don't want to be the person who's like, oh, look at that photo of that lawyer on this website. Ha ha ha, we're all laughing at him because that's what we do. Use a good photo of yourself. And that means if you have a tripod or you know somebody who knows how to take a good picture, and they know what the background and how not to have like a line going through your head when you're sitting there. So take the time to do it right. And the best thing to do is look at other websites that have attorney pictures and look what they do and see, look what works, look what's good, and try to replicate it as best you can. Have somebody who knows what they're doing with a camera try to do it for you. And if need be, you might have to pay somebody to do it. I mean, to me, that's one of the things that is probably worth paying for, is a good portrait of yourself if you're going to have a website. Okay, so now we're going to start getting into more of the design elements and some of the things I talked about earlier with visual elements. And color. One thing I can't stress enough is color has meaning. A lot of people just say, oh, I like blue, I like yellow. But color has meaning and your audience is going to react to it. The same way when we looked at that Donahue Green website, that green almost instantly made us think it was a environmental law website. A lot of that was color, and there was that green on there. So think about the kind of colors that your law practice would use. Let's just think about blue. Think of the shade of blue that's going to be different for an elder law site and a criminal law site. Elder law site might be more toward a pastel blue, a little bit softer, maybe like a royal blue at the most. Criminal law site, I can just see navy blue. It's like, oh, we are, royal blue. We're not. You can just see even the shade of blue is going to be totally different for a different site. I'm trying to think of any other. Corporate law is that kind of strong, manly red, white, and blue colors. It's classic corporate law look. It's got the whole button down, I'm wearing a three-piece power suit kind of look to it. Blues, dark colors like that convey that. So it really is an important element. Don't just say, I really like the color purple. I like the Vikings. I don't know why, but I like the Vikings. I like purple. I want purple in my website. Well, if that isn't conveying your message, don't use it just because you like that color. It's got to be. It's important type of law firm it is. What is your webpage trying to convey? One of the things I highly recommend is limiting color to like 3 or 4 different colors. You see some websites where it's like every color under the rainbow. Some people are really good at that, but we're all novices. To do that well is really, really hard. It's really hard to have 7, 8, 9, 10 colors that work together. One of the things that's really cool that I think looks really good, and I'll show you examples of this later, is using shades like gray to black and then just one color can be really effective. And that way you sort of can limit the clashing of colors and like, oh, I don't, a lot of us have a hard time choosing what paint to put on the walls. I mean, much less on a website where we have multiple. That can be really a great look, is using shades of gray, black, and one single color. And I think Simon still has links about a lot of color stuff and theories there. Okay, let's say you don't know anything about color. You can't figure out what color to go to. There's a website called colorschemedesigner.com. It's not a joke, it actually exists. And you can play around with this little color wheel and create your own palettes. It's pretty amazing. It's like, just by doing and following, like you can see up here they have complementary colors, triads, tetrads. Just by choosing that, you can actually come up with colors that will work together. They may not be the perfect for your site, but you won't clash colors that make people, want to like shade their eyes when they look at your website for the first time. So that's kind of a cool tool.
And it's the case, is it not, that you could get the
Hex codes. Yep.
Exactly.
Yes, you can actually save the hex codes if you want to like. Hex codes, everybody knows?
No.
Okay, hex codes are like when you have a website and you have a style sheet that says use this color. Hex codes are the 6 digits and letters that define a color. White is F, 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 F. Black is A. And there's all those combinations, the 16, what is 6 to the 6 to the 6 to the 6 to the power, define what a color is. So if you were on this website and you chose that color, it would display right down here. I don't know if this is visible or not, where it says RGB. That's the hex code, FF000. If you were to put that into a style sheet on a WordPress site, it would use that color. There aren't like names for 16 billion colors. So they use hex codes, they're called. 6 characters for the code. And so you get those and you can just, use them. This shade of red equals this hex code. Okay, that's a good question, right? So let's say that's even too hard for you to do. You're color, deficient. There's a website called colorlovers.com, and it's got the U in color. And this is like, it's cool, but it's also bizarre. Because people just play around with like that color scheme designer and post color palettes to the web. Like millions of them. It's just, and they give them names. And I know some of you are laughing, but it's like, yeah, it's amazing. When I was doing, a friend of mine who's a writer, a website for her, my idea for the website is to make it look sort of like a New Yorker magazine, because I wanted that kind of font, that feel. So I actually typed New Yorker into their search box, and there's like 24 returns. People have actually looked at New Yorker magazines like, oh, January 24th, 1969, and analyzed the colors on the cover and created color palettes off of it. It's just, it's mind-blowing. It's like the internet. It keeps everybody entertained somehow. So let's say you're like, oh, I want my color palette to look like whatever. You type in a term, somebody probably has used it for something. And if not, you can get close. You can search by, what color you want to start with, where you want 3 colors, 4 colors. So if you're like, I need a color that conveys this emotion, I don't know what I should do, or I don't know exactly the one, you can probably find it on here. Somebody's probably done it already. And then again, they have the hex codes, so you know how to get the colors from this page into your website. Okay, typography and font. Let's talk a little bit about that in a website. Does everybody know the difference between serif and non-serif fonts? Does that ring a bell? Serif fonts are on the side. You can see they have these little frills and flourishes on the end, whereas non-serif doesn't have. Those things are called serifs in typography. So there really are two big. There's a few other general types of type, but those are the 2 main type you'd ever use. These are the fonts, these 8 there, that are generally considered web-safe fonts, meaning no matter who's looking at your page, these fonts will look like they should. because the fonts have to exist on each person's computer. When you go to a web page, it tells the code comes and says use this font to display this page. But if you don't have that font on your page, it's not going to use that. It'll default to something close. So if I'm going to use exotic font number 1 because I like the way it looks. Well, if nobody has it on their computer, it's not going to look like exotic font number 1. It'll look whatever the default is on your computer. There's actually sites that have looked at the users, and for these fonts like Georgia and Palatino, Helvetica is like the Mac version of Arial. Arial is the knockoff version of Helvetica. Is much better than, But Mac, Windows, Linux, 98, 99% of computers will have these fonts on them. So you don't have to worry about somebody not being able to see it the way you want them to see it. So I would stick to these. There's more and more fonts growing, but if you choose one of these, you're always going to be fine. When you're
I just had a question if there was any information as to like typical fonts for typical, like you can pick colors based on kind of a feeling you want to give. Is there like certain types of fonts that are typically on law firm websites versus engineering websites versus school websites?
I would say of these, it's probably Georgia is probably the most common serif font because it looks very elegant. It was actually designed for the web. It wasn't a font that was designed for printing books. So I think probably Georgia is a little more writerly. I don't know how to describe that. It can convey a bit of elegance or authority. I don't know. That's hard to say until you actually use it, because I think you can use any of these fonts to really convey that feeling. I would say if you go outside of these, that's where you're going to have the problem. I think any of these would probably work. Maybe not Tahoma or Lucida. I think probably iffy, because they seem a little, like Lucida's a little whimsical. I don't know if it makes sense to you, but it doesn't have authority. Like, do you guys remember, I don't know, sports thing, when the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, when LeBron James went to Miami Heat, he wrote this angry letter and posted on the web, and he wrote it in Comic Sans font, which is that sing-songy kind of Microsoft, and it was like, what are you, out of your mind? First writing the letter and then doing it in Comic Sans. And it became this joke because you don't write angry letters in this, you guys all know what Comic Sans is, that kind of goofy sort of comic book writing that Microsoft has. That's the kind of thing you want to avoid. I think if you use any of these, maybe not Tahoma or Lucida, you'll be fine, because they all have that kind of seriousness to them. When you're using fonts, I would recommend for at least beginners, use 1 or 2. Do not use every font in the book. I would stick to 1 or 2. And if I'm going to use 2, I'm going to use 1 from the serif column and 1 from the non-serif column. And you think, oh, that's odd. Why would you choose the different ones? One of the rules of design is make it the same or make it very different. Because if you had these 2 fonts together, even though they look very similar, you would notice and it would create just enough of a clash to really create tension. They look similar when you just see one word, but if you saw paragraphs written by them next to each other, it actually creates this odd sense of something wrong here. It just feels a little off. So what I always recommend is like either use one of these for all your headers or all your sort of top level paragraph headers, and use this for all your paragraphs, or vice versa. It doesn't matter, but I wouldn't use like a Helvetica font for the top of my column and a Verdana font for the actual text, because it creates this weird tension. If you use Verdana, good. Same and same is good. Same and sort of same, bad. It just creates, it's almost counterintuitive. You think, well, they're the same family, but they actually create more tension than using different ones do. One of the cool ways you can use font, even if you don't want to use more than one, is think in terms of varying your bold for headers, or use all caps in your header. That's actually a really good technique, and we'll see that later when I go through some of the other law firm websites. Is actually, you can use the same font. It looks different. It creates visual interest just by using all caps, or bold, or a slightly different color. So, now we're getting into the CRAP principles of design. This is actually a nice acronym. And this is taken from a book called The Non-Designer's Design Book by Robin Williams, not the comedian Robin Williams, the designer. And I highly recommend this book, even if you're just if you want to learn anything about design, really basic, nice introduction. Even if you want to do business cards or letterhead, this is a really invaluable resource. You can find it in almost any used college bookstore these days. I came across when I was taking a multimedia design for libraries class in library school, and it's very good. It's very easy to read. It's not going to make you a professional designer, but it'll help you avoid a lot of the pitfalls that people who don't have any concepts are going to run into. So let's talk about the CRAP principles of design. We're going to look at websites to illustrate them. The first one is contrast. And that goes back to the idea that if two elements are not the same, then make them different. In this example, you have, make that darker, I suppose that's better. You have color as your contrast. You can see this part of the page is sort of their contact, so it's totally set off from everything else. So if that was still black or still white, it wouldn't stand out enough. You would just sort of lose it in the rest of the visual elements of the page. So they use color there as a way of sort of separating the page and creating that visual interest. And here is a page that, when I first look at this page, it looks pretty good, and I'm going to show you like how subtle this can be. But I think there's not enough contrast in the headers on this page. Now, if you look here, and I had to go back, look how similar in size this are. So visually, I don't really know where to go. It's pretty subtle, and it's not, horrible. But because those are all similar size, they're all the same font, they're all the same color, the eye sort of wanders around that page looking for a rest stop. Like once you get past this, I'm sort of like, okay, where am I going? And that's an example where I think the contrast is not, there's not enough contrast. It doesn't really lead you to where you want to go on that page. Other than the fact that I don't think you should ever use a welcome anymore. It's not 2003 anymore. There's no need for welcome to our website. But that's just a really subtle example of how little elements can really affect how somebody views a page. Here's what I think is really good contrast. This page uses all the same font. It's all Helvetica font. But notice how this, unlike that other page, they're really distinct sizes. These are all caps here, so it really further separates it from this page. And it's all the same Helvetica font, but the size is different, the all capping is different, and it really creates this, and the bolding is different. And so you really know where to look on that page. And this is, I think, is a really good page. And this is an example where I talked about using just grayscale and maybe a single color, and how effective a page can be just by using something like this. In fact, this is all grayscale. There's no color on this web page at all, but it's very effective, and it gives a really good sense of.
I'm reading about the attorney, and it notes that he's also a musician and writer, and because I was looking at it thinking, well, it's very artsy.
Yeah.
It's very and obviously he wants that to be a differentiator for him.
Music right up there as well.
Yeah, music.
If this wasn't a slide, we could go see what he's got. So that's a good example. I think this is really good contrast using without really doing a lot of fancy font work or colors. And that's where I show what I'm talking about. Okay, let's look at repetition. Repetition is repeating elements on a page to help guide you to where you want to go. In this case, you can see the repetition are those boxes around that. These are sort of used to create columns. And also look at how the color repeats in certain areas, and it just sort of guides you through the page. And if you could contrast that to like this page, which it's just sort of bland. And then when you go here, this page just has a lot more visual interest. And again, look at the image works with it. It's just a child advocacy thing. I know right away what this website does. It's not a plant growing. So that's an example of repetition. I don't have a bad example of repetition because it's kind of hard to find, if something's so nebulous, you can't really, it's just sort of out there. It couldn't come across one where it's really bad, like they used elements differently every time. Because most people sort of know repetition by, that's much more innate, like patterns, as opposed to colors. Okay, alignment. Alignment is the notion that elements on your page should flow into one another, and they should lead your eye to where the content is. And think of that. There's a theory that most people read the web like a giant F. When you start up here in this corner, you come down, you go across, you come down, you go like that. That's how people read the web. They don't go across. So that's something you want to think about. With alignment, you can actually work on that. That's how people read the web. So I'm going to align and outline my page in that way to send them to the information I want them to go to. Does anybody see something on this page that annoys them? And it's probably just me. I'm sure it's just me. You know, that drives me nuts. Why is this? You have all these headers. I doesn't drive me nuts, but I think it's like the page is really nice, and then they just sort of threw that down there as if, oh, we ran out of space. Let's just put it down there. Yeah, it's a minor thing, but to me, it's like it says that their designer sort of half-assed it, and that little bit of thing, they sort of like, yeah, that's good enough. I'll just keep going down there, as opposed to like, oh, that really doesn't fit there. I think I'll just let it there anyway. Yeah, it's a minor thing, and you're not going to like fail a class or a design class for doing that, but it's one of those little things that show you just how, how specific this stuff can be and what goes into creating a web page that you go, wow, that's great, without even knowing it. It's little elements like that can sort of like, it's sort of off.
Same concept with written work, I would say. That's why the features in Microsoft Word of, what do they call it, like orphan control, or what is it? I can't remember. It's or keep with next in the paragraph settings. The idea being that you don't want to have one
word at the end, yes,
on the next page.
Yeah.
And so you make sure that you're keeping your sections together, and it ends up looking a lot more polished in the end.
Yeah, polished is the word I think for this. It isn't like it's horrible, but that's exactly it. It's like you have the last trailing sentence on the second page of your document, and that's all. Well, with a little work, you could have got around that. Okay, here's alignment that I think is spectacular. I like this website. This is a local firm, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you. Look at these lines in this page. This is like, and then down again. It's almost like if you were like a Mondrian painting from the 30s and stuff. That kind of really geometric look, and it's really strong. And look at how everything is left aligned here. You don't have anything floating off to that side. You have that really strong line here. Even though these lines aren't actually on the page, they create that sort of, this is a separate section. So I think this is a really successful page doing that. I'm going to go back to this before. Even though there's no line here, you know just from the sort of implied line that this is a different section of the page. And they're also using the images to do that. So I think that's really successful. And the other thing too is everything is aligned the same way. Sometimes in web pages you'll see like alignment two different ways. You can do it, but you have to be really good to do it successfully. Sometimes you'll see left aligned text and right aligned text on the same page. Unless you really know what you're doing, you're going to create it's that visual tension is what you're going to create by doing that. So that's something to keep in mind. I know like, oh, I want this over here. I want, choose right align or left align and stick with it. And obviously left align is what most of us are used to seeing. So I think this is a really nice web page for doing this. Let's see. Here's another web page that has a really strong vertical alignment, right? I mean, when you see this web page, where does your eye go? Ooh, right down there. But I think it's actually too strong because it sort of takes away from what this person does. When I look at this web page and I follow this, I'm like, super lawyer. It almost makes me think I'm signing up to be a super lawyer.
Yes.
Because my eye doesn't really go here that this person's an Ohio employment law attorney. That's almost an afterthought because that's so strong. I find myself just going down that page. And it almost looks to me that super lawyer is more important than what this person actually does. And maybe it is. I don't know. I'm a super lawyer. I walk around, get a little t-shirt on or something. But this is just like a subtle idea of like how those elements can really change a perception of a page. And these are things you probably don't think about. And every time I look at a web page, I don't go, oh, the vertical alignment's off. But there are times when I'm actually studying web pages, you can see this really instantly. But most of the time I'm just like, I don't like the way that looks. I'm not going to take the time to go, well, they didn't use the right font on that. But when you actually think about it for your own web page, if you want to convey an idea and convey a feeling, those are the kind of elements that you have to think about. You really have to go, oh, does this, I like the way this sort of vertical navigation bar goes, but does it actually draw attention away from the important thing on my page? In this case, I think it does. And the last of the CRAP principles we will go over is proximity. Pretty easy concept, and that's elements that belong together should be grouped together. For instance, unless you really already have a business card, your contact information, or think your email, your name, your email, your phone number, your title, or whatever, all go together. You don't spread them all over a page. Same thing in general on a web page. What belongs together should be together. And that also brings in the idea of what should be apart should stay apart. And on this page, it's kind of a minor thing, but if you notice the way the spacing on this page, if I'm looking at this, when I look at this page, I think this and this belong together, right? Because this is a bigger space here. So I would think generally that this, it's sort of like, I'm writing about this and then I talk about it. Because the spacing, but it's actually the opposite. But the spacing is wrong. There's more space. That's wrong. Actually, this is the right one. But it's like they've done the spacing in such a way that it actually makes the paragraphs look like they're going with the wrong topic. I mean, it's such a minor thing, but there's no reason for that. Just header, small space, paragraph, big space, header, small space. And they just went the opposite. And so your eyes are wandering going, where should I look on this page? Here's another example of proximity. On this particular page, the space between the sentences within the paragraph and between the paragraphs are too close together. It actually becomes hard to read. And it's much more noticeable on a small screen than on a big screen, because obviously the ratios when you look at this in a small screen, it looks like one long sort of paragraph with this odd spacing. The other thing about this page, we mentioned earlier about how wide you want your pages to be. This page is way too wide. There's studies that have generally shown that most people find it visually pleasing to have 75 to 100 characters on a web page, maximum width. And that includes spaces. Anything longer than 100, it looks like this really long chore that you're having to read. In this case, I think I counted some of these are like 125 to 135. So it actually becomes harder to read. So there's some like web gurus who say, 60 characters, and that becomes kind of narrow. But the general rule is 75 to 100 characters are what people comfortably can read on a web page. And that's different from a book or a paper. What they can comfortably read on a web page without getting kind of feeling odd, and that kind of, again, that sort of it's a tension, and you may not even sense it, but it's like, when you look at a web page, you know why some of them please you, right? You just look at it like, oh, that's really good. You may not have the vocabulary, but these are the elements that are actually going in and affecting you when you look at bad, poorly designed web pages. So let's look at a quick couple of web do's and web don'ts. And let's see, what's some of the right notes in this? Here's a good web do. I really like this page a lot. There's one or two areas I might change. This is a law office of a solo practitioner in San Francisco, and I think it really speaks to a lot of the stuff we talked about earlier all day. And I'm just going to go through some of these. Imagery. Nice picture of Ernst there. It's professionally taken. He doesn't have like weird background on him. He doesn't have some sort of goofy smile. This is a nice stock image, right? Bridge. I'm sure he might have taken that, but he might have just found it on stock imagery. What kind of law does he do? Mediation. It's a bridge. And cliche, but it actually works. So it's like, I'm the bridge between these warring parties. So in this case, he's in San Francisco. He uses the generic, bridge, but it actually works to convey what kind of law he does. Look at how, like the font choices, he uses the same ones through here. They're separated by colors and by all caps, but it's the same font all the way through. There's no difference. This is on the side where he uses the serif fonts we talked about, but those are only here and up here. He doesn't do it in other places. He keeps it very simple. Color choices. Look at how soothing those color choices are. That's a good example of what I talked about by using, if you'd done like bright yellow there and dark blue, it would totally change the feel of that page. It wouldn't be very mediative. You know, it'd be like, oh my God, I'm aggressive. Well, that's not what you want in a mediator, is it? You want, oh, I'm going to bring you guys together. The alignments are really nice. It sort of creates this, it's all justified. It doesn't plot things over. Look how this sort of goes right down the page, even here through here. It doesn't have that image ending here or ending here. Things that are together, and look at how simple this page is. We talked about the number of pages you need. He really has the home, about, services, contact. And I think it's very effective. If I'm going to look for lawyer, I don't want to spend time reading, and I wish I was a real live website, I could click to it, but you don't want to spend hours reading every page. It's basically an advertisement with a little more. So I think that's a very effective page. I think it's one of the better ones that I've seen. I like that there's a few we looked at earlier, the Elmi, the Parkway. Those are probably the three best. And I looked at literally dozens and dozens of lawyer pages for this. The last couple presentations I've done on this. And we've designed do's, and now let's do design don'ts. Is this a law firm or is it what is this? It looks like some sort of sci-fi thing or a video game, or I don't know exactly what this is. I mean, it breaks so many bizarre rules that when I look at this, I'm utterly confused.
All I see is fighting.
Yeah, I guess, and yeah, but I mean, if that didn't say personal injury firm, I would have no idea what this was, or I mean, it's like it's so. I don't know what this is. And there's just weird stuff like this is here, And another thing I would highly recommend is black backgrounds, white text on black backgrounds are an absolute no-no. In fact, any kind of really dark background with white text. I don't know if you've ever read a lot of stuff. You get those lines after you're done reading on a web page. It's just not. It's too hard to read for most people. If you have dark background, light text, it's really difficult to read. So I would not do it. So this is actually a company that does a lot of these web pages. This probably isn't the worst one. There was one like for Las Vegas, and there's like showgirls everywhere. It's like, what in the world? But they do these sort of splashy web pages that are like, holy moly. But apparently they work, I guess. But I don't know if I want to look like that. Maybe maybe he's the greatest defense attorney in San Francisco. Who knows? Okay, inspiration. As I sort of finish up here, I just want to talk to you or give a couple of examples of places you can go if you want to look at really good design. One of the things I think that hurts people with whether it's designing or photographing or whatever is they don't know what good is. I'm like an amateur photographer. I like taking photos. And a couple years ago, I think I'm really good at good. And then I started going to museums and buying photo books and really seeing good stuff. I'm like, no, I'm not really good. I just didn't have anything to compare it to. And I think a lot of people with web design have that same thing. They don't really look to see what good is, so they have no way of knowing what they should be doing. They're satisfied because they put up a web page, oh, look what I did, as opposed to saying, wow, this is really what is top of the line. Obviously, none of us are going to be able to do that. These are professional designers who are doing this. This is basically a site of images of other websites, and you can click and go to them. It's a lot of professional designers post their stuff here and say, oh, I just designed this site for this client. But the thing about this is it really gives you an idea. Almost all of these are going to follow really good design principles. And then this particular page, simple.com, they're all very basic websites. There's not a lot of flash. There's not, it's not like an Amazon-sized page. So you really get an idea of how elegant and how effective a very small web page can be. Most of these probably have 10, 15 secondary pages, maybe more for some of them, but it gives you an idea of this is what quality is. And you certainly wouldn't use all of these. I mean, I can't imagine a law firm going this direction, but it gives you an idea of this is where web design is really at its peak. And this is another site very similar to that called siteinspire.net. This one has a nice feature that you can actually search by different layouts and different types. So if you're like, oh, I'm looking for this kind of layout or this kind of color, I want to be inspired that way, it's a really good place to start. And again, a lot of these wouldn't be really applicable to a website, the actual, some of the stuff, but it's more the idea of this is what a quality website looks like, as opposed to, my friend put up this site, or I look like, a bad MySpace account from 10 years ago or something. So go to these kind of places and see what you have. So that wraps up what I have to talk about. And if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll turn the lights on here.
Any questions right now? No? Okay, well, why don't we take 10 minutes and see what's Jackson. And Sean's going to stick around and help us with the second half as well, right?
I guess so.
Is that
I
okay?
got nothing to do. It's Friday. I'll be partying and partying.
I wanted to, that was just great. I wanted to run some things by. Oh, sorry.
I should have said Friday because then I get that song in my head.
Which, don't do it.
Party, party.
I don't know.
It's
It's luckily.
it's the YouTube sensation from like 14-year-old girl who became a viral video hit.
Rebecca Black?
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Oh, you've never been subjected to that?
I don't think
Oh,
so.
you've got to now.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry I'm late on Andrew.
Oh, hey, Andrew. How are you?
I had a court late this morning.
Okay. I am right
But,
Yeah, thanks. So we're recording anyway, so if you'll probably want to go back and
yeah.
have a look at the. Speaking of which, why don't I? And,
Did you get?
I just I saw that you wrote an email, but I was running, so I haven't.